So on the engine built, it's oil tight. All the she's full of oil, new oil, and I've just taken the oil pressure switch out, oil pressure light, warning light switch out, and put in a pressure gauge. So if we look at the increments on the pressure gauge, we actually see 20, 40, 60, 80. This is obviously just cranking, so plugs out to allow it to just crank as quick as we can get it, but remember it's only cranking. So this is with the mod, with the oil pipe mods. I've just got a car battery rigged up here. I'm going to use the bike's original earth, and I've just got another battery cable for the positive. So if we now just concentrate on that oil pressure gauge, and I'm just going to crank her over. So can't say much because of the noise of the cranking, but here we go. You ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? Here we go. And I think we could safely say we'd got 20 psi and a reduction. After I'd stopped, it takes time to reduce. So if we just do it again, I'll just show it again. So cranking. And a slow reduction back down. Okay. So where does that leave us? 20 psi cranking. What's it going to be? Speed is it going to be cranking at? What? 500 RPM. So as it stands at the minute, I'm quite happy with that. For cranking, 20 psi. I know it's cold, but just for cranking at 20 psi, I think that's. So once she fires up and gets it to the point where it's producing a lot more flow, so obviously the flow comes up against the resistance in the bearing tolerances, so then we get a pressure increase. So yeah, the minute I think that's pretty definitive that we steal nothing from the crank. I suppose the only other way would be to put the oil line, the original oil line, back on while I suppose I could do it that way. Put the original oil line back on and then have a look at it like that, but it's a kind of a step backwards for me. I am going forwards with this. As far as I'm concerned here, I'm quite happy with the fact that she's got 20 psi cranking. So we've got a pressure build up of 20 psi, just cranking, cold cranking. Then I'm quite happy with that. So anyway, we'll pick it up on the next one. Okay chaps, right, what I've done, in the interest of science, I've reinstalled the, in fact it's not science, but you know what I mean, I've reinstalled the original Honda factory oil line. Okay, as you can see here and here, and if I can get around the other side with my torch, using the same banjo bolt that we discussed earlier, that I'd actually previously, a couple of years ago, whatever, drilled out. So anyway, we've got the existing, the original oil pipe on. Bit messy. I was a bit reluctant to do it because, you know, these lines are full of oil now and stuff like that, so it's made a bit of a mess. But look, in the interests of kind of hard facts, I thought it's worth doing. So all this line is doing now is just looping back onto the plug, so there's no oil actually leaving the sandwich plate. Okay, so I'm going to try and position the camera now. So just to reiterate, if that's the right word, what we've been doing, it's same oil, same engine, same starter, same battery, same setup, same rigging up, everything, except the sandwich plate oil lines have been removed and it's been put back to standard. That's the best way of putting it. Okay, so it's been put back to standard. With the sandwich plate oil lines we had 20 psi. Now I don't know if I can see if I can get a little bit better closer. Can I? Maybe, yeah. I think that's just a little bit better. Again, cranking. That's all it is, cranking exactly the same as before. So are we ready? So this is standard Honda. Twenty psi. Cranking. I think that's pretty definitive that we've got 20 psi with the standard lines on. I actually did it previous to make sure it filled these up. You know, that it actually filled these lines up. So what that proves to me is at cranking there's no difference. What we stop coming out of here comes out of there. I'm going to be honest here, I think there's maybe 1 psi difference. I think it's, if we do this again, how the hell can I get that to stay there? Let me just see if I can do it like that. Can I do it like that? This is so awkward. Right, hang on a minute. Let me try wedging this in here and a bit of no. This is the joys of trying to do this when you're on your own. Just bear with me while I try all sorts of different. Can I stick them down plug hole? Does that work? Hey, that might work. No. Let me see. Right, I'm going to try and do it quick while it's sat there, okay? Because I have to use 2 hands on these battery cables. Let's see, and then we'll do it with, okay? Just over 20. 20, what's that in 2, 4, 6, 8. So that'd be 2, 4, 6, 8 to 40. So 30, well look, whatever it is, needle's width, the width of that needle over 20, right? So whatever, same gauge, same everything. So in a minute I'm going to put my oil lines back on and we'll do it again. Okay, as you can see, the new oil lines are back on. I've got this kind of just resting here, so I'm just trying to so difficult doing it when you're outside, isn't it? But let's just see if we can get it. Same deal. Bear with me while I try and get this. There we go. We're resting. Okay, so oil lines back on. The new oil lines are back on. Just got to get this battery closer to this negative, and away we go again. Same engine, same oil. We're now using the sandwich plate in front of the filter. Remove the original oil line and we're going to crank again. Okay, so what do we reckon we've got a bit of a difference? Probably half the, we've got at cranking speed, we have got a pressure loss, but I'm reckoning it's only, see on this pressure gauge, what is it, 2, 4, so each line, each increment is 4, 8, 12, yeah, it's 4 psi. Now, it wasn't quite, let's just look at this here, it wasn't quite up to the first digit with the original, after the 20, it wasn't quite up to, say, 24 then. I'm running it was like 22, say, in the middle, okay, 22 at cranking, and it just had to fill them oil lines up there. That's why, obviously, these oil lines were dry. I hadn't cranked it over since. So, let's just have another look now. So, we're saying kind of 22. Yeah, about 22 with the original pipe. that, what's that? So it's 4, 8, 12, 15, 16, just over, say 17, 18. So 18 psi with the new lines on, which means, I mean, that would kind of stand to reason, because we've got, back to the oil pump video, the last one, if we only had one oil line on here at 5mm taken from the front, because obviously the original one splits into two, so the flow is halved. If we only had one oil line on here, it's going to be exactly the same, because the fact that we've put two on has dropped the pressure down a couple of, I reckon it's dropped the pressure down, what, 3? If you want to be harsh, 4 psi at cranking. That's just at cranking speed. Now, when the pump can spin quicker, I believe it's going to be easier to get rid of it at cranking speed, because there's not that much flow. So it's once we get a lot more flow coming out of the oil pump, it's going to be more difficult to bleed off that flow when we've got more of it. If you've only got a little trickle flow, for instance, then it's easier to bleed some of that pressure off. So I believe that at cranking, I personally am quite happy with that. If we're at like sort of, what's that, so what do we reckon, sort of 18? No, I mean it's that increment just under the 20, so 16's, yes, let's say 18 psi for argument's sake, with the lines. We're at 18 psi with the lines, and we're at what, 22. I reckon we've got a 4 psi drop at cranking with the new oil lines on. Now, to be quite honest with you, I'm happy with that. We know we've diverted more oil, which is what this was all about. You know, we've diverted more oil. The crank's certainly got enough. It's got 20 psi at cranking, just at cranking speed. So, you know, the fact that, oh, you're rubbing, you know, oil away from such, you know, for me, I would sooner have that loss of pressure at the crank is where it's actually come up, and because if you think about it, it comes into the caps, then goes through the metal pipework into the cams, and the cams have got open holes in them. And the holes in the cams are actually quite big. You know, the heel of the cam, it's actually quite big. So to build up pressure in those, that's why I honestly believe at cranking that's really good, because we've only dropped, what, 3 to 4, if we're going to be harsh, psi just cranking. I mean, it's not even running. What speed's it cranking at? 500, 400 at RPM, something like that. So to just bleed off that amount, I'm quite happy with. I mean, I dare run that, fire it up. I'm going to leave this in so that when she's back in the frame and actually get it running, we can actually see what it's like. Hot, cold, you know, the whole shebang, as they say. So, but anyway, I think that's pretty definitive. There is a pressure loss, but it's not vast. You're really not taking that much away from the crank. So you're taking less away from the crank than what that would put that out. You know, so the light, that it would put that light out. So I think that's pretty definitive. And well, for me personally, my bike, my engine, my you know, for me personally, I'm happy with that. So anyway, let's pick it up when we get a little bit more. It's all factual. We'll just try and deliver proper facts regarding this. And I think it was worth doing that, putting the original line back on, seeing, because I mean, it's all right saying with these new lines on and checking it, which is what I did. So we've got like 20 psi, you know, worth of oil pressure at cranking. A little bit more actually with the original line on. So, but it, you know, we've got an extra flow route where it came into 2, as I've said. When it came into 2, the flow that we've got with 2 lines, it was halved. So that's where we've got a slight pressure drop. And again, the oil pump really isn't turning very fast at cranking speed, but we're still creating 20 psi. So I really haven't got a problem with that. Anyway, see what you think. See what you guys think. Leave some comments or whatever, or see what you think. But I suppose the proof's in the pudding as well. more so when she's running and she's warm. Okay, catch you on the next bit.